Hiya! Welcome to this, my 68th episode of VideoFuzzy. I'm your host, Terry J. Allen, sifting my basket of media memories, and in this installment, titled Pretty Good Year, I'm going to talk about, well, some of what's been going on in our media, social, and political landscape since last time. I feature a standout episode of Desperate Housewives, slow walk my cataloging of The West Wing, a little Shakespeare in the parking lot, and oh man, have I been getting a lot done around here. Welcome to the show. He doesn't have that on video, does he? We'll find out together on VideoFuzzy. Since writing, recording, and posting episode 67, Let's Talk About This, last time, I had, as I'd mentioned, a lot of work to do. You'll recall we had some leaks from our roofing project. Well, that soaked in behind the plaster, and along with some damp file crates that needed going through, one afternoon the paint just started peeling away from the walls. Well, one wall and part of the ceiling. So I let that dry out some while I sorted through boxes of dampened files, pulling maybe 2 garbage bags worth for shredding and recycling. Found a bunch of old photos that'll be worthwhile to scan and bring in sometime. I primed and repainted our storage space, creating a relaxing little reading nook for us. I reinforced the retaining wall to the north side of our house, made plans for some fall cleanup around our yard, and this house, we may never be done with projects, but this has been I nearly said this has been a pretty good year. 2020, the year we were all looking forward to. This summer is going to be epic. Road trips, parties, connecting with good friends, and what do we have? Quarantine, shutdown, sickness, loss of loved ones. Endless videos of Chad and Karen screaming in their swastika masks at essential employees with themselves no real choice whether to be there or not, all to a captive audience of whoever's online, which is most of us. Open the schools, close the schools. I have no kids, but I have coworkers with school-age children, and as limited as testing is in this state, as I'm recording, North Dakota's got some of the worst per capita numbers in the country. Right now, it's not currently recommended if you're asymptomatic, so schools make a great new risk vector. But then I've been working in a hospital for nearly a year now, and some days since this started, my heart has been in my throat. Hearing a coworker was furloughed after testing positive, running frantically back through my interactions. How long was I in that room with them? Were they wearing a mask? Was I? A few days in this time I've woken up, I've got dry eyes or a sore throat or a dry cough, and I wonder, is this how it starts? I take my temperature, I dot my eyes, at gargle with salt water, take a cough suppressant, and I'm relieved to feel fine. But what if I didn't? We're not set up to isolate at home. What if I pass it to Ralph? He does most of the shopping. What if some belligerent anti-masker runs up and coughs in his face? Karen is sharing. We do what we can. He goes in the morning. Most people who go then are responsible. We mask up. We wash our hands. We use hand sanitizer. And if we don't need to be out, we stay home. I nearly said a good year. Police murder black people defiantly, on camera. You can't even say it was reflex. 8 minutes and 46 seconds is a long time. And it hasn't stopped. Several other fatal encounters since then. Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Then people get huffy if you talk about police brutality. What happened before the video? What about their police record? What about all the good cops? Well, yeah, what about them? What about demilitarizing law enforcement, de-escalating situations? Like, it's ridiculous to even talk about. It's ridiculous to talk about desalinization or fertilization or space travel or CRISPR gene therapy. There's a woman, I've heard her interviewed. Her sickle cell anemia was cured by genetic modification. That's amazing. If we're able to cure sickle cell anemia and give a grandchild more time with her grandma, irrigate the deserts and feed the world, then it is worth at least looking at whether we should reorganize city budgets to emphasize mental health and social services. We don't need to send an armed response and 4 cops to a man accused of passing Monopoly money. We don't need to murder a guy who fell asleep in a drive-thru, or who's just walking home, or just trying to help break up a domestic dispute. We've just got to infuse some compassion into our social order pretty soon. Yeah, I've had a minute to think about it. A lot of our nation's problems stem from distrust. Karen hears conflicting information from a variety of sources, grabs hold of the one that requires the least of her, and then we have 900,000 views of her throwing a tantrum in a Trader Joe's. No one's telling her she needs to work or a mask. That Dr. Fauci himself says it makes no sense to walk around with a mask. I have no regard for anything else he says, but that statement made in the early days of the pandemic when masks were scarce and needed to be prioritized to healthcare providers, they grabbed hold of that, carved it in granite, and it's the Bible now. Hell, there's a picture of him with his mask off in an empty stadium. Karen's straining her arm muscles now, pointing. He's a hypocrite. Burn all the masks now. Just burn them. Trust. We feel anyone laid off in the wake of this crisis is gold-bricking on the taxpayer's dime. That sweet, sweet unemployment. I've had to live on unemployment for 6 weeks last fall. An additional $600 a week would absolutely have helped, but I noticed I also had no health insurance during that time. I had all of my bills, mortgage, and car payments to maintain. I didn't have any way of knowing how long I was going to be collecting unemployment, and I was fortunate to find work of any kind because that assistance had a cutoff point. And as our First Lady advised, I tried something new. I trained as a journalist, and for 10 years I held my favorite job I've had in journalism up in Minot, putting feature sections together. I also, as part of one of the best teams I've ever been a part of, enjoyed my work at the Tribune in Bismarck right up until I didn't anymore. I then worked for 4 years at a print shop until it closed, and had I been hired on at the company that took it over last fall, well, it's hard to know. Honestly, it's hard to see where I'd fit in over there. So, yeah, something new. Supply clerk at a long-term care facility in the upper Middle West. They took a chance on me, too, and it's been a good fit. Good people, direct ways of seeing the difference you're making. I felt welcomed and feel valued in ways I have not elsewhere, and for sure, given the year we are having, things could have been way worse. But I was talking about trust, the suspicion that people are living the high life on unemployment. I wanted to convey some direct experiences by which, yeah, it helps, but it's not a long-term strategy for success. Again, some compassion for people dealing with layoffs, the potential for evictions, foreclosures, lack of available jobs, what to do about childcare if they do find work. I mean, I enjoyed the non-directed time, but it was hardly worry-free. One requirement for receiving unemployment assistance is that you have to be actively seeking work. I mean, it's not just freeloaders on an endless vacation. Trust issues are worsened by divisions on, say, immigration, hordes of unwashed teeming across the border unchecked, specifically to take all of those cushy farm, menial, housekeeping, and landscaping jobs. Oh, man, life is so sweet for undocumented workers in this country. They're just dicker gerbs. Oh, I love this. Entire families living in constant fear of being deported, but this idea that they also stand in line for hours by the millions, defiantly casting vote after vote after vote so as to destabilize our elections. County polling guy always wants to see my driver's license and match it to my handwritten address, but undocumented workers, you think, can just... I mean, really, I could go on, but I've made my point, and Fox already broadcasts 24/7. Trust among citizens is broken, as in, whoa, hey, who even is a citizen? Is that a citizen? Are you a citizen? Let's see some papers. What are you hiding? What are you trying to get away with? A bunch of filthy fill-in-the-blanks just want to break in my double-wide and steal my Velvet Kid Rock. I saw you looking at that. What was that noise? A gun? A siren? A crime? Probably a crime. It's all a crime. Everything I don't like is a crime. Trust is broken. It just is. The damage could be irreparable, and if you start from the idea that most of our social issues rise from distrust, it really isn't that hard to see who's spreading it. Rich people, people with a vested interest in keeping the middle class and the working poor afraid of each other, together with the media power to fire hose that narrative into every eyeball in the U.S. I mean, seriously, after too many to name, the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, the snot-nosed punk who then murdered outraged protesters, hashtag after hashtag after hashtag, like there might be some sort of narrative someone's out there hoping to fuel at this specific, volatile, easily malleable and manipulative moment about crime. Except, honestly, if there wasn't one shooting somewhere, there'd be another. The U.S. is... conservatives are in charge of damn near everything right now, and also, somehow, some of the angriest, most upset, discriminated against, wear no mask, they're the real victims in all this. Right. So, yeah... 2020 might not actually be a pretty good year. Maybe not. Hard to say. But this podcast is a media commentary, and more likely you're here to hear about my media collection. So gather around my little video fuzzies. It's time for a Friday night feature. Friday night feature. For sure, I've been in need of a beacon of hope for a while now, and almost as if on cue, on discs 970 and 971 in my classic collection, I found the best thing that ever could have happened, the 100th episode of Desperate Housewives, featuring Beau Bridges as the late, lamented handyman Eli Scruggs. The show opens with Eli announcing his retirement with notes in everyone's mailboxes up and down Wisteria Lane. He tells Catherine Justin as Mrs. McCluskey that he's got one final repair to make, a loose shingle on Susan's house, and then he's hanging up his tool belt for good. Doc says he's got to retire for his health. He's got a bad heart. And all but proving his point, upon fixing Susan's loose shingle, this man we've not known 5 minutes has a heart attack and dies. Gathered for their weekly poker game, Susan, Lynette, Bree, and Gabby recall ways in which Eli touched each of their lives. Gabby recalls how she wouldn't even have been in this coffee clutch if it hadn't been for Eli. After seeing this former model as lonely and having trouble making friends, Eli put in a good word for her with the other women, getting her invited to their poker game. She makes an absolutely terrible first impression, which he also mentions, and advises her to stop being so stuck up, open up to her neighbors, and accept their friendship. Eli also held on to the first draft Bree had put together of her cookbook. She tossed it in the waste paper basket after a cringy dispute with her husband. After his funeral, Eli hands it back to her, praising a recipe he'd tried, her Cajun meatloaf. Elsewhere, Edie recalls the boost of confidence Eli represented to her years before, after her hot but disinterested husband of 2 years finally came out to her. She was feeling vulnerable, Eli was a warm male presence, and she pounced. Classic Edie Britt. Then Lynette recalls how, fed up with stay-at-home motherhood, she was on track to return to work. The timing was perfect. Her youngest is about to enter kindergarten when, damn it, she's pregnant again. Well, she's not going to let that get in the way. Lynette is determined to return to work, scheduling meetings actually around her contractions. She's running errands, she's grabbing groceries out of the car while on the phone with her supervisor when Eli notices that she's actually left her child out in her hot car. She was so distracted she left the baby fussing in the car seat, and Eli heard the child and brought him in, saving the day. Lynette realized in that moment that she needed to focus and recommitted to being a full-time mom. Susan, whose roof Eli died on, recalled the moment that she learned her husband had left her for a secretary. She waved Eli in from the street to change all her locks. "Yard sale!" she shouted, throwing Carl's clothes into the yard after cutting the pockets out of all of his pants. Eli, trying to comfort her, redheads are always trouble, just made it worse. And he'd seen him with a redhead, but Carl's secretary was actually a blonde. Susan was aghast. Who all was he cheating on her with? Did everyone know but her? Susan is seething, but still needs him to change her locks. Well, we see them again after she split from Mike, to change her locks again. Eli reaches out, letting her know that he sees her. He's seen her struggle, how he feels that she's a hero for never giving up on love. As Susan asks him to repair her loose shingle, he tells her of his retirement. "You have been the most consistent male relationship I've ever had," she says, and that she really doesn't know anything about him. He says once he's done fixing the roof, he'll come down and she can ask him anything. And as the episode winds up, we hear Mary Alice's story. Yep, Beau Bridges wasn't the only surprise of this episode. Brenda Strong has appeared in every episode of Desperate Housewives as this arch, third-person, quite omniscient narrator, but she made some limited appearances in the series itself, mostly in flashbacks since, well, spoiler alert, her character Mary Alice Young commits suicide in the pilot episode. Here in the middle of Season 5, we find Mary Alice Young securely in her element, surrounded by her friends, and how much sense she makes at the center of that circle, a good illustration of the loss represented by her absence. She was the first person on Wisteria Lane that Eli approached when starting his handyman business. She didn't have any work for him, but as she took his card, she noticed he had holes in his work boots and could really use the work. She found a vase that he could repair, and then handed his cards out to all of her friends. 2 years later, when she was at her very darkest moment, Eli stopped by with the door handle that he'd found to make up a matched set and asked if he could install it. "Not today," she said, doing everything that she could to put on the best face for him. He could tell something was wrong, but accepted her reassurances and left her alone, holding the vase that she gave him as a gift. Since outbursts of generosity are known to precede some suicides, he later wondered if he could have done anything to avert hers. He vowed at that moment to be more involved in people's lives and to help in whatever way he could. As his casket was lowered into the grave, Bree reached out and straightened the floral arrangement on his casket, wanting to fix something for Eli for a change. Her move to adjust that stray yellow rose was so touching. Honestly, I don't know if every 4 years or so I'm just on the edge of my edge about the state of humanity, and I know this is a soap opera, and I know it's a drama, and for Christ's sakes, I just 20 minutes earlier saw Nicolette Sheridan hop on top of him, but the Mary Alice Young storyline, her pain, his response to it, the turnout to celebrate the life of a character that we'd never met before this episode, that broke me a little. I was so moved by the idea that in the wake of someone else's pain, a man commits his life to fix not just broken things, but broken people. Oh, I'm sorry, was this a desperate Housewives? Friggin' show creator Mark Cherry blasts it through the stratosphere. I mean, I've been blasé as these season 5 episodes have rolled through. I knew I cared about these people once. I knew by the time they did the time jump and the new storylines, I was getting to be over this thing, and frankly, I'm not sure I kept recording to the end, but oh wow, this episode. This one was good. Cross Connection. On the surface, Desperate Housewives represents a minor tug-of-war in my Studio 6 Feet Under challenge. Felicity Huffman was program director on Aaron Sorkin's Sports Night and made an appearance in the West Wing. While she sat out Studio 60 itself, she represents a strong link, along with James Denton as Mike Delfino. I mentioned his appearance in West Wing I saw not too long ago. Of course, Frances Conroy's appearance as a recurring character actually in Desperate Housewives seals the deal for 6 Feet Under, but for this episode, it's worth taking a closer look at guest star Beau Bridges, and that appearance sent me spiraling down an IMDb rabbit hole of references. Not least of which Beau's appearance in the Stargate SG-1 series with Amanda Tapping showing up in my collection, bridging from Sanctuary in my classic collection to Motherland in my current. Beau appeared in the Stargate Atlantis with Jason Momoa, mentioned recently his appearance in Braven. I saw a weirdly familiar name when I clicked on Beau's involvement with that ridiculous Brooke Shields Hallmark Movies and Mysteries production, Flowerpot Mysteries, Mum's the Word, with Brennan Elliott, who showed up shirtless in an episode of Bones I talked about back in episode 56. Beau was in Brothers and Sisters, another tight connection with 6 Feet Under, through Rachel Griffiths. He was in White Collar and Franklin and Bash. He was in The Closer and My Name is Earl and Will and Grace. And I guess the only way I'm not highlighting him as a golden thread is by running the segment header now. Beau Bridges is fun to watch. I absolutely loved him in The Fabulous Baker Boys. He brings a lot of power and depth to the characters he plays, finds whatever levels he's asked to and makes them believable. A solidly talented performer, truly enjoyable to discover him here. Well played, man. In other cross-connections, I found Supernatural and Sykes Kurt Fuller in the West Wing, as well as Mark Harmon as CJ's Secret Service detail. He played Secret Service agent Simon Donovan, who CJ calls Agent 99. I love this show. Other notables, Lily Tomlin made her debut appearance in Posse Comitatus. Adam Arkin returned to counsel the president about his insomnia. Bare Naked Ladies and Amy Mann appeared in show Rock the Vote stage production. Amy Mann also having appeared in episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and American Crime Story, The Assassination of Gianni Versace. And from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., referenced in my conversation with Mark Bailey in my Providing Leverage episode, I saw Clark Gregg, Agent Coulson, in a West Wing Season 4 episode as FBI Special Agent Michael Casper. It's a magical place. Day 7 of 24, featuring Kurtwood Smith, also read in that 70s show set actually in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as well as Janine Garofalo. Day 7 premieres with John Billingsley captured in a dramatic car crash and a hail of bullets from terrorist gunplay. And from the West Wing Season 4 episode Angel Maintenance, I had an appearance by James Morrison as the pilot. Morrison appeared throughout Season 7 of 24. And on Disc 964, I found an episode of The Daily Show with Jon Stewart where Samantha Bee interviewed GOP political consultant Kellyanne Conway in a green prom dress, talking about rebranding the GOP post the Bush II presidency and the Great Recession of 2008. Interesting. Now on VideoFuzzy, a fond reflection. And closing out this segment with a couple of fond reflections, in a Season 3 episode of Brothers and Sisters, Kitty's on her book tour and conducting an in-show interview with Regis Philbin and Callie Ripa. I encountered that appearance shortly after hearing of Philbin's recent passing. Rest in peace, Regis. And then I, along with absolutely everyone, was floored to learn that Chadwick Boseman, aged 43, losing a hard-fought battle with cancer. I've not seen his catalogue of work, so I can't speak with the depth of appreciation others have brought to their memorials, but just to highlight a few episodes back, episode 63, titled Unconventional Means, I skated past Black Panther a little too briefly. There was a point I should have highlighted. During the South Korean casino sequence, now, I have thought for many years that I'd enjoy seeing a black James Bond. This goes back to at least the early noughties when Keen Eddie was on the air and Mark Valley answered Colin Salmon. I thought Salmon would make an amazing 007. I've seen Undercover Brother, which is hilarious. I've seen Roger Moore's Bond appear opposite Grace Jones, who held her own perfectly as Mayday, and I can't believe I'm the only person who feels Idris Elba would make a phenomenal Bond, and I'm still very much looking forward to watching Lashana Lynch ascend once No Time to Die is released. Most recent I've seen puts it in November. But watching Boseman as T'Challa, Lupita Nyong'o as Nakia, Nene Guerrera as Okoye, and Letitia Wright as Shuri conduct their recon, identify their objective, and pursue it via high-octane mid-city car chase and subsequent interrogation, I feel like I've certainly glimpsed that potential. Hell, Shuri makes a great cue, and Boseman's attitude was victory itself. Also, taking a few minutes to rewatch Black Panther, Killmonger's argument is all the more seductive. An argument 2 years and many hashtags harder to refute than it was in 2018, even with the appeals to tradition and Wakandan nationalism. But T'Challa's confrontation with T'Chaka and change of heart stopped a step or two short of Killmonger's vision of worldwide revolution, which I imagine would be fairly destructive, so way to save the world. As for Chadwick Boseman, his work stands as inspiration to us all. Rest in power, Highness. Wakanda forever.
What I've been watching.
I talked about what's been going on around here, but we managed to get out and do some fun things as well. On August 1st, my husband Ralph and I took in the North Dakota Shakespeare Festival Shakespeare in the Parking Lot production of Hamlet. We took in what they billed as the first public performance of this show, which boiled the 5-act production down to about an hour and a half at intermission. We'd never seen a production like this, which they performed in the North Dakota Heritage Center parking lot here in Bismarck. We were fortunate to have a reasonably good view of most of it, though next time I think I'd clean the windshield better first. 4 youngish actors performed on 4 raised platforms. They were outside and they practiced social distancing. The only time they needed masks was during Hamlet's sword fight with Laertes at the close of the show. Otherwise, they delivered their lines into mics broadcast to our car stereos. It was very easy to follow. They cut a lot, mostly Polonius being annoying, but we're also not surprisingly forced to cut most of the play within a play. The ghost was basically Claudius with a sheet over him. That was fun, and the same guy played the gravedigger and hyped his gear. And once again, I was disappointed when the soliloquy came off as little more than a memory exercise, which it did surprise me. This troupe of 4 players had their hands full just presenting the show, but as written features a few dozen characters, yet in that distillation managed one of the strongest exhibitions I've encountered concerning Hamlet's mental distress and neurodivergence. It lacked a bit of focus and internal coherence, but the actor's performance explored those aspects of his anguish and anxiety that sometimes come off as play acting. A decision that Hamlet is just pretending madness in pursuit of ulterior motivation, which, sure, except as written, it's remarked upon by everyone closest to him. Hamlet is more than the aftermath of a palace coup. It is a broken person's response to a messed up situation and well worth exploring in depth. Which is why, as I said, it was so disappointing to hear that most unmistakably Hamlet of soliloquies, to be or not to be, rattled off like a laundry list. I've sat with these words, I've explored them, this young man's seething existential panic, but in performance I've encountered a few times pompous, sometimes stentorian, but generally it's this nodding pact with the audience. Go ahead, check your phones, words, to be or not to be, that's the whatever, man, you know him, I know him, get through this, I got this fun scene with Ophelia coming up, right? Lyr rep. Look, I'm old. I'm 50 years old, so at this point it's never going to be me. I'm Polonius if I'm anyone, but each element of that verbal journey addresses a separate facet of Hamlet's circumstance. Treasonous rage at war with self-preservation distilled through a filter of crazy and cunning, and I'd really just love to hear that explored properly one of these times. Well, not this time. The 4-person, 2 trunks, 90-minute parking lot Hamlet in the round had a lot of its own problems to solve just mounting the production, and I respect that. They did a great job in taking exactly one step back. It was nice to be able to attend a production like this at a time when gatherings of any size are a risk. Thank you, North Dakota Shakespeare Festival, and all the very, very best in your future efforts. Well done. Diving into my classic collection. I think it was my second episode, I discussed my approach to this project, that in cataloging X number of discs, I wouldn't watch them all the way through. I'd just figure out what I was seeing and make a note of it and then move on to the next show. For this installment, my classic VHS to DVD cataloging effort came off as more of what I'd call a slow walk approach, and I think there are several reasons it happened this way. First, I had like 9 cases of file folders I was sifting through and organizing after they got soaked, much of which I did during this cataloging effort. And if you're sifting through file folders, it's just easier to let the disc play than to fuss with fast forwarding. Then, and I think this is probably the biggest reason, a lot of what I was watching was my recording of Bravo's marathon rebroadcast of The West Wing. It was just so beautiful binge-watching a show set in this fictionalized White House populated by thoughtful adults. This set covered episodes from seasons 3 and 4. Season the third they drew from character flaws they seeded over the course of the first 2 seasons to develop into even stronger, richer storylines than would have been possible otherwise. Joey, Marley Matlin as polling consultant Joey Lucas, returned just as Bradley Whitford's Josh Lyman started exploring a new love interest, Mary Louise Parker's political consultant Amy Gardner. John Spencer's Leo McGarry's alcoholism collides with Martin Sheen as President Jud Bartlett's and multiple sclerosis, which explodes into congressional censure ahead of his State of the Union address. Brilliant. Political problems require political solutions. Cue Mark Feuerstein as Clifford Kelly, congressional GOP counsel, who narrowly averts a mean-spirited and ill-conceived line of questioning during the censure hearings. I had something of a meta moment while cataloging this set in an episode titled The Black Vera Wang. Rob Lowe as Sam Seaborn walks in holding a VHS tape containing about a minute's worth of darkly intentioned campaign skullduggery put together by GOP political operatives. A VHS tape. It still does stuff to me emotionally. The episode ran in 2002, and we're in a world where there have been DVDs for so long, but this was physical media, magnetic. DVDs are digital. Back then they were dedicated T1 lines, but it still would have taken so much bandwidth to transmit. The VHS is contained. DVDs are transmissible, shareable. They don't need to be physical media. You can even, back then, you could stream them, streaming digital media, I'm sure, but the VHS tape is secret, and it's so fragile. It was a plot point in Knives Out. The security at the old mansion was on VHS tapes that had been taped over 1 million times, knocked out by a refrigerator magnet. Oh, get comfortable, I am off. When I started doing this, it was the 1980s, and video home systems were still figuring out VHS or Betamax. Video cassette recorders were expensive. You could pay thousands of $1980 for them, nearly $5,000 in today's money. I don't know when I started buying VHS tapes by the 10-pack, but I did, and I did so multiple times because I was recording every damn thing. Obsession is a strong word, but it's hardly out of place. I mean, how else do you even fill 5 shelves of industrial shelving? Not even that. 5 shelves of industrial shelving, plus not 1, but 2 small bookshelves during my transfer operations. I kept dozens of current recordings on deck. I was recording shows to VHS tapes and transferring those discs, and, well, by this point it was around the spring of 2009, and I'd transferred nearly 1,000 discs worth of material. That guy, I'm not going to call it obsession. That guy, he had just turned 39 years old. It was dark in that man's life. He was single, he was isolated. Most of his very best friends were remote, they were distant. His relationships were long distance. He was lonely, and he couldn't have known it, but he wasn't going to meet the love of his life for another 2.5 years. I'm not going to call it obsessed. I'm calling it dedication. I'm calling it commitment. I have these discs to watch. I have these shows to enjoy. I have this material to talk about because a little over a decade ago, as I'm recording this, a sad, lonely, middle-aged man in the upper Middle West had months and months worth of VHS media that he wanted to preserve, and here we all are. How cold and how remote? Well, in the next episode, We Killed Yamamoto, Josh sent Janelle Maloney as Donna to Bismarck. It was a thing where the North Dakota Democratic Nonpartisan League wanted to add a plank to their platform about removing North from North Dakota. Josh wanted to send Donna as a show of support, but not much support. She asks, how does she get there? Josh points out that it's the capital. They have an airport. We do have an airport. It's adorable. We also got our own area code and a zip code and everything. Donna speaks to the... Oh wow, on a show as well researched as this, the sign behind Donna is Democratic Party of North Dakota, when absolutely it would always acknowledge the Nonpartisan League. This episode they let the gag writers off the leash, and I'm pretty sure the reason was we're running up to Jed Bartlett ordering someone's assassination, so they did enough research to track down the Great Seal of the state, which from where I'm sitting doesn't look like such a great representation, but hell, they were also stuck using the internet from 2002, so what the hell do I know? Yeah, Leo McGarry and Jed Bartlett plot to assassinate a guy, force a landing, execute by firing squad against the backdrop of a very dramatic presentation of Shakespeare, so that all has a greater impact at the first part of the show they make with the yucks. Have a Democrat from North Dakota suggests that having the word North in the name of our state hurts tourism by suggesting the state is cold, snowy, and flat. Our state is cold and snowy as many as 8 months out of any given year, and it's flat whatever we call it, though the Badlands are beautiful. I walk. That's my primary form of exercise, walking. I walk, and I know that this summer it has been hot, and I have been sweaty. So I don't believe our average temperature, as Donna answers this, is 7 degrees, with an average snowfall of 42 inches. But there was a reference made earlier in the episode to the Borscht Belt, so I figure that there's a fryer on staff somewhere along the line. Google tells me that our average annual temperature ranges from an above freezing 37 degrees to a very pleasant 47, and average annual snowfall, don't lie, 26 inches, that's still over 2 feet, but again, the Google I've got is better than the Alta Vista they had, so fair enough, it was just nice to be mentioned on television. I mentioned Sam Seaborn. On the Disc 960, I found the sibling rivalry episode of Brothers and Sisters with Rob Lowe as Sam Seaborn, well, Robert McAllister, now Senator for California, delivering the line, "The last thing I want to become is a creature of Washington." Good times. Yeah, back to the West Wing, Jed is taking a Shakespearean spectacular called The War of the Roses, the Henry cycle, King Henry's the 4th, 5th, and 6th. We find him at the top of Henry VI, that Henry V is being eulogized, and they've got Jeff Buckley's plaintive version of Hallelujah running behind CJ being informed that her security detail and nascent love interest, Simon Donovan, Agent 99, played by Mark Harmon, has been killed in a convenience store robbery. Sorkin wrote the absolute crap out of this one. Informed of the attack, Jed steps out for a smoke and encounters, of all people, his political rival, James Brolin as Governor Bob Ritchie. They exchange words worthy of restive antipathy. Ritchie gets a little folksy on Donovan's death, one of those, "Crime, huh? Oh, I don't know. He was a Secret Service agent. A human being would ask if he had family. This administration had been targeted. Donovan had been attached to that detail, wounded, took out one of the gunmen, and never mind his heroism. Ritchie in that moment refused to even acknowledge his humanity. And Jed gives him, "You've turned being unengaged into a Zen-like thing, and you shouldn't enjoy it so much as all." And later, if you're wondering, "Crime, huh? I don't know." That's when I decided to kick your ass. Returning to his seat, Jed signals Leo to order the assassination. No, not of Ritchie, that'd be dark. No, the Kumari Defense Minister, Abdul Sharif. Bartlett's team worked on this for weeks, and it's their only practical means of stopping him, and the only chance they've got of doing it. His order is carried out. Bartlett broods in silhouette as celebratory music plays from the stage. Close season the 3rd. Exeunt all. Then in the Season 4 premiere, brilliant piece of storytelling with the team stuck on the campaign trail. Pipe bombs went off during a swim meet at the college campus, and we had Jed Bartlett's reaction, hailing the athletes who ran back into the flames to help with rescue efforts. This is a time for American heroes, he said. We will do what is hard. We will achieve what is great. With Tori Amos's cover of I Don't Like Mondays going, oh, wow. I was not expecting that. It was just shivers. That was off her September 18th, 2001 compilation, Strange Little Girls. Absolutely fantastic vibe for that moment. I watched a lot of season 4 in real time with this. I characterize it as a transitional season. Set during Jed Bartlett's run for re-election, transition themes abound, and there's a lot of darkness Sorkin was paying off from seeds he'd sown end of season 3. Also, at the time, out here in reality, we were fully 2 years into George W. Bush's actual Republican administration, with Democrats took both houses of Congress, so viewers were in the midst of divided government for realsies, and all in the shadow of contentious election return, looming multi-front wars, and continued emotional, political, and policy aftershocks in the darkest moment of recent American history. Tangled up in the general attempts at breezy, light, and personable, with Toby and Charlie at Dooley Hill as Charlie Young, in a California bar brawl, and Allison Janney dancing in a green dress singing about Sandy Havana's, storylines wound through this season of political fallout, disagreements, bitter disagreements, soldiers on television tortured, and actually by the time I hit disc 975, what I was noticing, and it's because so very processed and they had to fuff a lot of off-screen stuff, a lot of telling not showing, a lot of soundstage stuff after all the sound and fury of season 2. What I was noticing was there were so many white guys talking about policy initiatives and debating ideas, and yeah, there was some diversity here and there, but the ones talking policy initiatives and debating ideas were biased and largest white, and yeah, pretty much mostly guys. Don't miss here, lots of great women, lots of great roles for them. Stockard Channing, Allison Janney, Mary Louise Parker, Lily Tomlin, Mrs. Hamantashen herself, no shrinking Violet Shee, but yeah, so often this season the women on screen, it's carrying narrative and worse as targets for mansplaining. Season 4 had a lot of white guys talking, and from the vantage point of 2020, that really starts to stand out. But since we've got it to here, I'll close out with the end of the season 4 opener. Richard Schiff as Toby Ziegler walking back to the White House with Donna and Josh saying, "If our jobs have taught us anything, it's that we don't know what the next president is going to face. If we choose someone with vision, someone with guts, someone with gravitas, who's connected to other people's lives and cares about making them better, if we choose someone to inspire us, then we'll be able to face what comes our way and achieve things we can't imagine yet." Almost as if on cue, President George Bush then appears on discs 963 and 964 in his farewell address. "While our nation is safer than it was 7 years ago," he said, "the greatest threat to our people remains another terrorist attack. Our enemies are patient and determined to strike again. America did nothing to seek or deserve this conflict, but we have been given solemn responsibilities and we must meet them. We must resist complacency," he said. "We must keep our resolve, and we must never let down our guard. At the same time, we must continue to engage the world with confidence and clear purpose. In the face of threats from abroad, it can be tempting to seek comfort by turning inward, but we must reject isolationism and its companion, protectionism." He added the priority for expanding liberty abroad and standing up for good in the face of evil. "Murdering the innocent to advance an ideology is wrong every time, everywhere," he said. "Freeing people from oppression and despair is eternally right. This nation must continue to speak out for justice and truth. We must be willing to act in their defense and to advance the cause of peace." Indeed. He's just a guy. He's absolutely got a team of writers, and none of them are Aaron Sorkin, but he does all right. I have some notes. As it turns out, obstructionism, the opposition digging their heels and refusing to budge, refusing to negotiate on points public polling clearly establishes as priority, did a lot more damage to our nation, faith in process, and government of, by, and for the will of the people than, in fact, any renewed terrorist attacks. In the years since this address, fear has done more damage to America than any other thing. Fear of difference, fear of change, fear of other people has done far more actual damage than terrorism itself in this nation. And, as if in anticipation, Bush directly calls out the very things implemented by Obama's successor: isolationism and protectionism, third time's the charm on travel visas, holding camps at the border for persons fleeing seeking better lives, separating children from their families, and then blaming victims. When people try to address police brutality by calling it out, they're shouted down with "all lives matter," and "what about human trafficking," and "what about Jeffrey Epstein," and "what about this little white boy for whom by all accounts justice was secured all but instantly, because that is actually how the system is set up." We will have legitimate differences of opinion. We will and should have vigorous, hard-fought arguments over what policy directives this nation must pursue, and everyone has a history, and everyone's got an agenda, and realizing these things, we must seek out the path that takes us furthest along the directions we want to go. But in doing so, just for one example, no one is arguing the rights of pedophiles over and against the rights of child abuse victims. Well, they're doing so a lot less these days vis-a-vis the Catholic Church, but relativistically speaking, I imagine the percentages are something like 99.999, and there's a bar over the last 9 to a vanishingly small number of people who are cool with and actually advocating child abuse, human trafficking, and pedophilia. But goodness, there have been public protests in my city. News reports, people making signs and leaving their homes to stand up for #SaveTheChildren, as though there were some organized opposition to them. Unemployment is through the roof. Millions of Americans have no idea what they're going to do as eviction moratoria expire. The post office is apparently under attack from its own management. Cabinet-level departments are reported held by persons legally unqualified to lead them. Schools have no coordinated approach to starting up again, despite a full summer of watching rates of infection and deaths go pretty much in one direction. Masks are actually banned in some places, but these people are out protesting pedophilia. Good for you. You've hit on the one issue in this country for which you will encounter universal support and exactly zero pushback. Way to draw that line. Just as an aside, I've noticed a lot of cool side effects from binge-watching West Wing episodes, and probably some of you have as well. I talked about I ran into the 7th season of 24, which premiered against the backdrop of President Obama's inauguration in 2009, and we see Jack Bauer giving testimony at a Senate hearing. The vibe was something like, oh crap, we're about to be actually held responsible for all this Patriot Act stuff we've been doing, and we'd better show some terrorists actually terrorizing people. And Jack Bauer went too far and says so, but with the fate of my country on the line, etc., etc., etc. Meanwhile, in all of these very bad days in which Jack Bauer lived or resurrected to fight another, they all had at least 364 other ones to debrief, examine, analyze, and explore best practices. These episodes seem to take place in an absolute vacuum. At all the highest levels of national security, different presidents, shifting priorities and alliances, but the real-time conceit and the need to keep it interesting, keep secret, also fraught with drama, kept the whole thing pretty soapy. International security crises as high-stakes telenovela.
Ay, Dios mío, gasps in Spanish.
That said, Kiefer Sutherland has a watchable quality. Ended the series in his mid-40s with good energy balanced with a world weariness that by the end made him a decidedly complicated character, and probably the right energy for his Designated Survivor series, which, just a guess, I've never seen a minute of a single episode. Whatever the political thrust of the project against whatever real-world events, as of this season, Season 7, we're officially 2 years out from SEAL Team 6's best day ever. The storylines explored topics worth exploring, raised questions worth raising, and served on some level as a national education on ethics and government, with enough entertainment value for people who that was not what they were watching for. Bit of a callback here, I encountered Bradley Whitford's appearance as an egg research scientist in 7th season episode of Monk, called Monk on Wheels. Adrian Monk attempts to recover Whitford's stolen bicycle, a one-of-a-kind gift from a research foundation. Together with its assistant, Natalie Teeger, Monk tracks it to the ne'er-do-well's lair. Mr. Kuramoto, it's Encyclopedia Brown. Sally and I are looking for our blue bicycle. You're not in trouble, no one's pressing charges. And then, blammo, bullets through the door and he gets shot. That's a lot of do over a stolen bicycle. As per always, however, the case goes a bit deeper than that, and wheelchair or not, Mr. Monk is on the case. Jon Stewart and his wacky list of things. I've mostly been skipping past these, but here it was, January 19th, 2009, and the best damn news team on television, Jon Stewart of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, put together a fond farewell to the Bush II presidency. Jon Stewart acknowledged the administration for its seemingly endless contributions to his programming with a roll of credits over Babs singing The Way We Were. They include... Written and directed by Karl Rove. Cast in order of appearance: Decider George W. Bush. Actual President Richard Cheney. Mr. Cheney's attempts at human emotion by industrial light and magic. Decider's wife Laura Bush. Decider's actual wife Condoleezza Rice. The Supreme Court: John Roberts, Sam Alito, Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, Anthony Kennedy, William Rehnquist, Sandra Day O'Connor, and some other people who don't matter. Prop Master General Colin Powell. Evildoer Osama bin Laden. Mr. bin Laden stand-in Saddam Hussein. Guantanamo detainees censored. Heck of a job doer Michael Brown. Best boy, General David Petraeus. Worst boy, Richard Clark. Iraq location team, second unit director Donald Rumsfeld. Location scout, Paul Wolfowitz. Iraqi extras casting, Paul Bremer. Additional material by Ahmad Halabi. Abu Ghraib sequences directed by... No, not Donald Rumsfeld, that was a few bad apples. Guantanamo Bay sequences directed by... Again, not Dick Cheney, that was a few other bad apples. John Bolton's mustache wrangler, Don Bolton. Unit publicist, Sean Hannity. Steve Ducey, Bill O'Reilly. Brian Kilmeade, Greta Van Susteren, and Glenn Beck. Undercover CIA agent Valerie Plame. Oops, sorry, forget we mentioned that. Stenographer Judith Miller. Scapegoat provided by Louis Libby. Shrapnel collector Harry Whittington. Reporters Stretch, Super Stretch, Little Stretch, Hemi, Slick, Tiny, Ox, Moose, and Helen Thomas. Coalition of the Willing. England, Australia, Estonia, Lithuania, Slovakia, and Tonga. Coalition of the Unwilling. Everybody else. The Pooty Poot, Vladimir Putin. Executive boob coverer John Ashcroft. Rich Uncle Pennybags Henry Paulson. Chief of Staff Joshua Bolton. The Truth Squad Ari Fleischer, Scott McClellan. Dana Perino, Tony Snow, Sweathog uncredited, Scott McClellan. Key Grip, Lindy Eklund. Promotional considerations paid for by Halliburton. Additional dialogue, Roger Ailes. Gaffer, Douglas Feith. Such songs as I Am the Decider, written by Karl Rove, performed by George W. Bush. Soundtrack available inside your head for the rest of your life. Mr. Bush's suits, courtesy of Botany 5000. Mr. Cheney's suits, courtesy of the Filipino women locked in his basement. Botched on location in Washington, Iraq, and New Orleans. Special thanks to 537 confused voters in Florida. Memories. The following production was significant as well. January the 20th, 2009, night of the inauguration itself, Jon Stewart interviewed openly gay Bishop Gene Robinson, part of a team advising President Obama on LGBTQ issues, and discussed the advent for expanded civil rights for gays and lesbians from the promise represented by the first African-American president. Well, 6.5 years later, gay marriage was the law of the land. It's actually kind of breathtaking, since we know this was not a priority for this president, that, in fact, his views on gay marriage required some evolution. Needed to evolve, I think were his exact words. And summer of 2015, 5 years ago, the Supreme Court did the thing, and that fall, my now husband and I exchanged vows. We will celebrate our 5-year anniversary next month, and I will be forever grateful for the hard work by all the brave men and women, cis and trans, in all the years leading up to this that made it possible. This was never the be-all and end-all. Despite recent protections, transgender rights continue in limbo, and trans women, particularly trans women of color, have been targeted, and we as a nation need to figure this out. Trans rights are human rights, and if you're blue in the face from shouting all lives matter, where's your outrage for these attacks and these deaths? People are just living their lives. You don't like it, Christ told you what to do. Love your neighbor. Walk towards each other with compassion. If it's hard, well, that work is on you. Do the work. Finally, I passed the 100-page mark in my classic catalog. That's the most arbitrary milestone of all, but I noticed it the other day and I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot of searchable information. I've considered different options of what to do with the file when I finished this, but I noticed my old Nook device has an SD drive, and, well, if the thing is still operational when I'm done, maybe I can port it across as a text file. I know it has search functionality, which would make my entire collection searchable from a self-contained little reader. It's definitely an idea for down the road.
Checking out my current collection.
On to my direct-to-DVD recordings. I have watched so many things since we last spoke. including the entire second season of The Alienist, Angel of Darkness on TNT. It's been weeks since it's even been on the air anymore, so time capsule. Here's my reaction after watching the first 4 episodes of the 8-episode season. I must have put this together around the end of July. I finally dug into the episodes I built up of The Alienist, Angel of Darkness on TNT, and once again I'm having so many problems with the pacing of this story. It ends, there are only, season 1 they trundle along reasonably well until cramming the final third or so of the novel into the season finale, a 10-episode cable drama. Nothing about this was low budget. With this one, the story is having enormous trouble getting down the road. It's been a while, but I remember vast swaths of the book recounted a high-profile court trial in upstate New York. Even if we completely reorganized this thing, we knew the who in the whodunit in 20 pages or so. They had an address to check now for 3 episodes, and blessed if I know why they haven't gone there yet. So much more hypnotizing the wife of Spain's ambassador and lavish parties. There was a significant reveal at the end of episode 4, and I'm for sure enjoying it, but it's absolutely taking its sweet time about getting on with it. Rejoining this reaction in the present, they did end up completely reorganizing the story. Author Caleb Carr is credited as consulting producer on every episode, so he must have had at least a hand in this, which is why the characters rang more or less true throughout, and even in the more hidebound reorganization, the story held on to some good energy. The realization that struck me when I encountered Cyrus, now barkeep, was that our young friend and humble narrator for this one, the young coachman Stevie from the first novel, was nowhere to be found. Cyrus is barely a presence, which the season actually had 8 episodes, not 300 pages. You've got to economize and prioritize. They did invent a strong feminine assistant for Sarah to rely on, perhaps hoping to make up for leading dozens of strong female voices that drove the narrative of the novel. Sarah's investigation of a missing child, taken as it was from a politically disadvantageous client, the ambassador for Spain, which the original took place while the Brooklyn Bridge was being built, and the sequel around the turn of the century. The teleplay is meant to be taking place the following year as Sarah's opening a detective agency, and I say politically disadvantageous because the Spanish-American War is going on, so I don't know if that fits with this timeline anymore exactly, but it's background anyway, because in taking the ambassador's case, Sarah discovers the child has been taken by a serial abductor. This theory is dismissed out of hand by all the boy policemen, but Sarah turns up evidence to suggest children are being abducted and then murdered and discarded for whatever imperfection by a woman who has the backing of a local crime boss. For as compelling a tale as this makes, The Alienist, Angel of Darkness, spends far too much time on John's betrothal to a society girl and rival publisher's daughter, during which he pursues an emotional and then physical affair with Sarah. Dr. Chrysler's working with a dark and engaging woman, also a psychiatrist, to map the psychosis of this serial abductor, while at the same time fighting to keep the doors open at his institute in the wake of a young ward's acting out and near-successful attempt at suicide. While the story did explore the family history, loss, and trauma of the chief suspect in this case, Rosie McEwen as the engaging and endlessly resourceful Libby Hatch, the action never left the city, New York on the cusp of the 20th century, a touchstone for this series. Hatch, whose crimes might have gone unpursued had she not foolishly and impulsively kidnapped a Vanderbilt, was fearless in assisting the police with their investigations, sending them down the wrong path and slitting a lawman's throat to escape justice. While cuddling her kidnapped babes before killing them for displeasing her, she also targets those she feels have done her wrong. The taskmaster maternity ward matron at the hospital, her former employer, and her mother for separating her from her child so many years ago, feeding her psychosis. Libby is aided in these efforts by her lover, the crime boss Gugu Knox. He was a powerful underworld figure as presented in both the novel and the series. He was obsessed with Libby, who held him in the sway of her sexuality like an addiction. He begged her to give up the child she'd stolen. The Vanderbilts were too powerful, he pleaded, but her mind was made up. Meanwhile, John and Sarah explored Libby's abandoned home. In the novel, Stevie is clued in by a dead garden to explore an enclosed space underneath. Libby had built a veritable catacombs beneath her home, firing contractors halfway through jobs and hiring others so no one knew how it all connected up. It was quite clever, and in the book he is pursued through the dark underground maze by a murderous lunatic bent on his destruction. In the series, John and Sarah just look at an apparently abandoned storefront next door, say, "Oh, I wonder what's in here," and find a crib enclosed in wire mesh and souvenirs she kept from her tiny past victims, the very evidence they would need to press their case. While their investigation into Libby's crimes was tightening, Knox secured her passage to Europe. This should have worked, but first she wanted to exact her revenge on her pursuers, trapping Sarah and John in a showdown in Sarah's office, forcing John to beg for Sarah's life. Sarah gained the upper hand, however, and the notoriety she gained in the resolution of the case was just the boost her fledgling detective agency needed. Yeah, you can't do in a short-run episodic what you can in a full-length novel, but it was certainly an engaging period crime drama and a fun series to encounter at a moment when there's not a lot fresh and new out there to enjoy. Well done. The restoration I mentioned of our storage area involved sealing a few cracks in the plasterboard, then painting a couple coats of primer over where the paint peeled away before putting up this rather eye-catching midnight purple. The overall effect is that of an accent wall, and while waiting for each layer to dry, I monitored the transfer of Legion's Season 3 to its own desk. This was quite a lot more exciting than watching paint dry. The entire series shreds distinctions of good versus bad, moral versus immoral versus amoral, intrinsic value versus utility. As the focus shifts from David's war within his own mind to the conflicts within his support group, through to tearing through space and time itself, and in doing so quite inadvertently helping the time goddess Switch to unlock her true potential. Now, I don't know if we can completely give him this. David was just trying to rewrite his entire timeline. Switch was just eggs he had to break in pursuit of that particular omelet. His reasoning was, if he was successful, he and Switch would never meet and she'd be fine. And if he wasn't, everyone's sacrifices were for naught, including his own. As the season progressed, it was clear that he needed to succeed. The big twist was that his own lifelong tormentor, the Shadow King, from whom he broke free in Season 1 and battled in Season 2, confronts his own past self at the end of Season 3. The same sort of thing happens with Sydney in different ways before she leaps through an open time portal, and the resulting battle royale is quite literally mind-blowing. The series ends with a friendly-looking button that invites the viewer to play again. I believe I will at some point. First, I'd like to craft disc sets for the 3rd and 4th seasons of The Good Place and my copies of Dispatches from Elsewhere into their own disc sets, but until I get that kind of free time, I truly enjoyed completing that process for Legion. I've said it elsewhere, all of this media is available commercially, and any copy I own is in compliance. No broadcast misuse or copyright infringement is intended. I've never distributed any copies of any media. Any reorganization of my home media collection into ever more compact formats is for my own personal use as prescribed by law. Homemade disc sets merely save me having to sort through and switch out a bunch of different discs to watch programs originally sent to my home via broadcast or cable television, and here they stay. Now, I did the same sort of home burn, kind of, with my copy of the Book of Eli. I set up to record overnight so I could fill up disc X333 and then delete it from my DVR and watch it at my leisure. Well, I got that chance sooner than I figured I would. While that disc was recording, my DVR threw a test of its emergency alert system, so I got maybe half of the movie, a frozen blue screen, and then the rest of the file was just a couple dozen songs from the 80s music channel, the channel my DVR was set to at the time. Well, nuts. So, following afternoon, I set my DVD recorder to record the second half of that movie onto disc X334, then deleted my DVR recording. Now I had both halves of the movie on 2 different discs, so I recorded a Frankendisc version to send commercials. Well, when I do that, I essentially have to sit there monitoring the recording to pause and resume the new burn, so I did that while I sorted files. I did a lot of file sorting on this set, watching the movie while sorting now more or less dry files into keep and then toss. And once I accomplished that, I cleaned out my main floor closet while recording a bunch of DVR recorded movies in real time. I'm getting ahead of myself a bit, and having made an ad-free Frankenburn of the Book of Eli, I'd say apocalyptic movie was weirdly apocalyptic and made sense of the kind of 2010 way that some were scared liberals were taking things. The book that Eli swore his being to protect was sought on all sides by scheming ne'er-do-wells because it was the Bible. The Holy King James Bible that Eli was taken to the keepers of all knowledge and the rebuilders of civilization. Oh, no, you don't want random regional warlords out there in the post-apocalyptic alkali desert gaining access to a Bible. That would never do. I mean, it's Mad Max times. They'd be way more up in a bunch about safe water and gasoline, but yeah, I suppose Bibles matter too. And there's a massive twist at the end I won't spoil, but yeah, this paranoia that there's some future world where they've archived the great works of civilization, but damn libs destroyed all the Bibles except for this one, a lone defender named Eli Scott. Well, that sure casts the all-too-familiar victim vindication storyline a stripe of that following craves, absolutely. And see, we love black people. Denzel's the hero. It's not that Obama's black that the world has ended and Bibles are nowhere to be found. It's just, will no one finally stand up to all those darn liberals ruining everything, destroying Bibles and guns and everyone's personal sense of holiness, righteousness, and dignity? For all that's, leave Jerry Falwell Jr. alone! This was 2010, of course. By 2016, there wasn't a gun or a Bible to be had anywhere in this nation, and black people were unquestionably in charge of absolutely everything. Thanks, Obama. In other vaguely religious-themed dystopia, I caught Assassin's Creed from 2016, how the actual fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was... No, sorry, not even for... I'm not a gamer. I didn't come in seeking what take they were... where they were actually going with it. I watched it. Action-y movie was big and action-y, and the visuals were stunning, and it pulled me in. But I just cannot turn off the part of my brain that says, wait, what? At least the humanity shone through a lot more in Guillermo del Toro's The Shape of Water from 2017. Humanity in all its joyous imperfection. People who need to be in control of everything. People who are so comfortable with their privilege that others barely register. People awkwardly showing their love for another, even if just in support. And people who can see past differences to the heart that they share. In the end, Sally Hawkins as Eliza Esposito is just a mute cleaning lady standing in front of Doug Jones as a mystical fish creature, etc., etc., etc. In terms of context, it ain't subtle, but the ham-fisted archetypes allow us to take a lot of stuff as read and just enjoy the spectacular visuals of the piece. Eliza reaching out to the creature, the bond that they form, the absolutely no way in hell they should have managed this jailbreak, and everything that happens afterwards, the not remotely watertight space above the classic movie theater, the stolen moment in that shower together. This film is a wild ride. The pressures and priorities are easy to track and understand. Mostly. I mean, there's definitely some stuff you just have to accept because it's playing out in front of you on the screen the way it is, but I'm happy I finally saw it. The Shape of Water was technically from my last set, but I breezed past it unforgivably and I wanted to share my thoughts. I also finally got to see Inglourious Bastards, which was a Tarantinian tour de force. The movie theater parallels made me think of it, but yeah, World War II movies, beating up Nazis, absolutely other themes I enjoyed. I mentioned I watched a lot of movies in real time while I was sifting files. I caught a few Jason Bateman films. The Family Fang with Christopher Walken, that was just wild. And Juno, I finally watched that one all the way through. I thought they did a really good job with it. I also saw Game Night, which, yeah, that one was a little bit all over the place, but overall pretty strong. Good to see Jesse Plemons again from Breaking Bad in that one. Speaking of which, caught Bryan Cranston in Wakefield. This was where the kind of already a little bit crazy suburban dad who kind of got a chip on his shoulder about life decides that after a commuter train derailment that maybe he died. Maybe he'll just live out in the shed with the camping gear and let his wife and his family think he's dead. I saw this one, and I saw Commuter with Liam Neeson. Different focus on that one, but there were a couple of parallels. Train accidents and the sense of isolation. More with downsizing, though, that both Wakefield and downsizing were ultimately kind of pointless. Just stuff happening on screen for a couple hours with little to resolve. Also caught The Town with Ben Affleck, as well as The Accountant. That was pretty good. Beautiful mind gets to the bottom of a company's finances before it goes public, and that was kind of a fun multi-layered game of cat and mouse. Always enjoy seeing J.K. Simmons everywhere I do. I enjoyed finally watching The Circle. Tom Hanks is well cast as a... No, I'm not a bad guy. Everything is all good here. And so quickly you'll get whiplash. I saw FXM retro productions of Kagemusha, which was basically Dave, but Japanese with subtitles from the 1980s. The Phantom of the Paradise from 1974, which was completely crazy go nuts, as was Across the Universe, a Beatles songbook threading through storylines of love and war and death. It was a different take on the musical form than Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping, with Adam Sandler Sandberg in a mockumentary, an entertaining piece, not a lot going on with it, but I needed to pause for exactly this amount of time to say I thought Sarah Silverman did a really good job with this 2016 production. I have ripped into her like she isn't even a person before, and I've got some words to eat here. Honestly, she's quite capable of inhabiting a role and telling a story. She did a good job with that one. Well done. Speaking of mockumentaries, I was motivated by that Damn That Television podcast to check out What We Do in the Shadows from 2014, a fun slice of undeath production with several generations of vampires sharing a house together in Romania, showing what happens when vampires stop being polite and start being real. It's a hoot. Another worthwhile comic horror adaptation was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies from 2016, where zombies are written into Jane Austen's novel, and there's a lot of women in period dresses doing badass swordplay. I've certainly seen worse. Absolutely better than The Fury from 1974, a novel by John Ferris reminiscent of Stephen King, but without much of a point, though that could have been the adaptation. I've never read the thing. Never even heard of it before I saw this thing. Young guy loses his diplomat father to a firefight with Arab insurgents while his father is on assignment overseas. Once he gets back to the U.S., his special powers of causing machinery to run amok and causing people pain is harnessed by bad guys, and seriously, this is already more attention than this thing deserves. There's spies and counter-spies and young women also with powers to give people nosebleeds, and there's also polyester bell-bottomy and also so poorly structured it never so much ended as it stopped. So, yeah, as I was saying, basically pointless. I did finally get to see Solo, a Star Wars story, and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Those were cool, though the latter could have used a lot more Wasp. I may already have X2 X-Men United in my classic collection somewhere, but it was fun to renew my acquaintance with that iteration of the storytelling. Speaking of Joss Whedon, we weren't. According to IMDb, they didn't pull him in on X-Men until 2009, my bad, but just by way of transition. His Cabin in the Woods seemed to inspire a kind of structural suburban horror genre in Keep Watching, where the action is actual people fending off murderous home invaders cut together, time-delayed, and presented as a movie streaming online. Compelling. Closing out this segment, I wanted to make so much fun of The November Man with Pierce Brosnan from 2014, and it totally deserves it. There's extended car chases, explosions, gunfire, super lame mentor-mentee dialogue, and a level of intrigue they'd want to punch up a little before lining it into a subplot on Bewitched. But here's the thing. What happens, seriously, when you start scripting your podcast literally over the course of more than a month is that when you're watching a truly forgettable movie, you can actually forget it. Honestly, I have a much better shot at this when it's all I've got going on, rather than maintenance and restoration of my home. Along with the filing, cleaning, and painting I've mentioned, the home repairs continued into Labor Day weekend. Happy belated Labor Day, everyone. Installing a long-neglected shelf we've needed in the kitchen finally got after that. And a 2 when I'm able to get after the writing process all in one go. In this case, I've had to rewrite, shift focus, add to all sorts of... I'm sure you'll be able to figure out where all over in this installment. Every week it's some new run-in, and no, I'm not especially happy that we can't just disagree anymore, that we've got anger wrapping up. People are posting they want other posters dead on threads that I'm in, and both sides absolutely make the case that if the other wins, you, just as an American out doing your job, living your life, aren't going to be saved. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't feel all that safe right now. I'm old, like I've said. I'm 50, and this past month, I've been seeing my native-born husband for 9 years next month. We are coming up on our 5-year anniversary in October, and this past month is the first time someone has ever flashed me a white power symbol. Now, I was alone. Ralph wasn't there. It's possible that he thought I'd flash it back and we'd be best friends, but middle of milk white North Dakota, just walking around on the street, you feel you've gotta... Someone is feeling a lot more secure about themselves than they bloody well should, and couldn't tell it in my voice. I enjoyed the crap out of Inglourious Bastards. Hell, yeah, I think if you're going to be a Nazi, you need to carve that right into your forehead. You need to tell the whole blessed world that you are a sorry, hateful son of a... You flash your punk-ass little gang sign at me again, you... No. I will not take your bait. No. I will not add to the violence of this narrative. This country is home to 300 million souls, and we need every single one of us to make this work, including you, Adolf. You can think anything you like of me and my husband, and if I knew who you were, I'd absolutely avoid your place of business, and I would tell your boss why. But I'm not punching you in the face, which I'm sure you'd love because it'd justify everything that happened afterwards. No, the security you have in your person is part of the social contract we enjoy as Americans. More, I'll just note, than you extend to me and mine, but that's the point of being radicalized. You adhere to root causes, the fundamentals, our living social framework, our founding ethos. Respect for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all Americans, and then America within the community of nations. Have we immigrants? Have we refugees? Are we so poorly resourced we cannot meet those terrifying situations with compassion? Are we no longer capable of negotiating treaties and trade agreements in good faith, sharing health information and resources? Must we forever be doubling down on our negativity? There's got to be ways we can do this. There's got to be a way to wake up from this walking nightmare of insensitivity, hatred, and rage. Find our common humanity. Find a sense of decency. Make division, hatred, and bigotry shameful again. Flash me that symbol again, I will respond with Wakanda Forever. And if that makes you feel some kind of way, good.
Now let's pull a little something down from off the shelf.
While I was kicking back and sifting through my files from storage, sorting and keeping and tossing, I had a wonderful opportunity to kick back and watch some commercial media, including my 4th season disc set of Arrested Development. I'd heard bad things, but I quickly figured out what was going on. The first 3 seasons were centered around Jason Bateman as Michael Bluth, trying to be the responsible one while his entire family and family business was busy falling apart, wrapping in 2008. In Season 4, set in 2013, we saw the same kind of over-the-top antics, but from the perspective of various family members. One storyline plunked Tobias, Lindsay, and Maybe in India, where they all impacted each other's lives, often inadvertently. Other storylines found Michael sharing a dorm room with George Michael while trying to obtain the rights to his family's story to try to sell it. Then George Sr. and his twin brother Oscar involved in a land deal right on the U.S.-Mexico border. Brother Job gets increasingly involved in the life of a rival illusionist, while Lucille becomes queen of her cell block. Tobias coaches an acting troupe out of a methadone clinic, and Buster is just wow. All in the context of the Bluth's involvement in the annual Cuatro de Cinco attempt to ruin the Cinco de Mayo. What happens in storytelling with cycling perspective is, at first glance, it looks repetitive. Most of the details you missed first time around happen out of shot, most deliberately so, and in the hands of these storytellers, they find excellent ways to keep things from being actually repetitive. There's a mystery, I'm not sure it's resolved, maybe it is. Lucille Estero, Lucille 2, turns up dead on the stair car, but honestly, if that's actually a loose end, there's a huge potential for worse, including the fact that George Michael has a baby out there somewhere. Oh, hey, direct time to his character in the Juno storyline. Neat. I'm hoping to track down Season 5 at some point, but if I never do, it's just fun that I got some more time with these people. I also threw in the pilot episode for the Crazy Ones. Yep, that disc set arrived just as I was finishing up with my files, so I just watched. This is the one I was chatting with my friend Mark Bailey in episode 66, Finding Leverage, starring Robin Williams and Sarah Michelle Gellar. Part of what I loved about the energy from that work, I hadn't even remembered, but it was a David E. Kelly production. He's the practice and Boston legal guy. In 2013, he put together, I'd call it a fairly involved production, set in an advertising agency, young people everywhere, and who was calling to team up Williams and Gellar? Who put those names and that energy together? No idea, but I feel like they did a great job with this, and no, it won't be soon, but yeah, glad I have this in my collection and absolutely looking forward to binging it sometime. And the Season 2 episode of Fargo on FX, Nick Offerman and Ted Danson, Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Plemons, Gene Smart, Bokeem Woodbine, and Brad Garrett. The pressures of life in the late 1970s, a family drug-running operation, gambling debts, and a housewife hit and run. The Waiting for Dutch season premiere opens with a scene from Massacre at Sioux Falls starring Ronald Reagan, where the scene is set and all the extras are lying out on the frozen ground in February, and Dutch is in his trailer getting his makeup touched up. Setting this season in 1979, we're also, as a nation, waiting for Dutch to ascend the White House and rewire how the global economy works and just make everything awesome. Brad Garrett outlines the overarching structure within which the story will be told in a boardroom presentation, how the Kansas-based drug operation will forge inroads into a 3-state lock held by the Gerhardt family, the head of which, Otto, recently had a stroke. The wife, Floyd, he said, is tough, but, a girl, and the sons will be vying for control, which Garrett pointed out made this an opportune time to strike. Dunst and Plemons are in it, account as she hit Rye, Gerhardt's youngest, with her vehicle, and Plemons came home, found the guy had come to, and stabbed him in self-defense. There are layers and layers and layers of psychological discomfitude between those two, but this is where that judge comes in. See, Rye targeted the judge to get a case dropped against a partner with whom he wished to open an exclusive Selectric typewriter distributor for the upper Middle West, and Rye figured equal partner sounded like a great idea compared with third banana gopher in service to the family business. Also, Children of the Sun, 1979, by Billy Thorpe. Recommendations in the comments led to Lunatic Fringe, 1981, by Red Ryder, both of which rocked, so I bought them on iTunes, because I'm old and I still do that. I also took the opportunity to throw my VHS copy of Mystery Science Theater 3000, the movie from 1995, This Island Earth. There was nothing about this production that stood out from any other Misty production, but it was a great excuse to mention something I saw on IFC. A Misty production ostensibly dated 2018, which means... Oh, right, Riff Tracks reboots celebrating 30 years. This set features Felicia Day and Patton Oswalt as the evil Gizmondo overlords. The first couple I've seen, not gonna lie, they've been shaky, but there are lots of movies out there, plenty worthy of send-up, so I'm recording a few, and I'll comment on them as I get a chance. In the meantime, hell, everyone either find this or buy this or stream this. Dave Made a Maze. I ran into this delightful little movie while looking for cross-connections on Criminal Minds, and I found the credit on Kirsten Vagnus's page. Spoiler alert from the title, but what Dave, Nick Thune is Dave, a creative if directionless 30-something, and what he actually made is a labyrinth, fueled as it would seem by his insecurities. His girlfriend, Annie, played by Mira Rohi Kamani, comes home after leaving him unsupervised for the weekend, and there's a complicated sort of refrigerator box castle fort type thing with an entrance, and there's a Dave inside, but he can't find his way out, he says, and don't come in, he says, it's dangerous. Annie calls his goofball friends, which include a camera crew and other hapless, way too late 20-somethings, and despite his warnings, they enter the maze. Dave is nowhere to be found. There's some really clever trick photography as they move from room to room, including this sort of half-completed low-energy level that's just sort of what scientists send rats through as learning exercises, but other parts of the maze are way more challenging, including kind of origami ball pit. When they do meet up with Dave, they've actually figured out that this is way more than a few cardboard boxes taped together. One of Dave's hands is actually turned into paper mache. Maze has eaten or killed one or two of their friends, and they're being pursued by this insanely jacked minotaur. So the stakes are plenty high enough, and what's worse, Dave's maze appears to have taken on a life of its own. Yeah, it's silly, it's confusing, but it's also sweet and charming, and kind of a fun reflection on the problems that arise from fear of commitment and feeling like you're in free fall, having little direction in life when it's about time to be nailing some of that in. A cautionary tale, maybe, as well, and some of these characters will absolutely drive you crazy, but Dave Made a Maze is certainly one of the more delightful little puzzles I've encountered recently, and likely would have never even heard about it except for doing this project, so thank you, universe, for plunking that down in front of me. What else? Well, about forever ago, as I mentioned up there, relative times mean nothing in this entry. I encountered a British sitcom for 2012, sort of in the style of Curb Your Enthusiasm, called Toast of London. Follows actor Matt Berry as Stephen Toast through the crazy encounters he has with rivals, theatrical and romantic, roommates, lovers, agents, media, and in one blind date situation, hoarding, which, as that episode ended, was getting a little meta, and you wonder if this is Toast's story or his actual life. But most annoyingly, having provided the 3-episode taste of this 3-season situation comedy, this amuse-bouche, as it were, IFC yanked it. Very disappointing. Maybe they only had 3 episodes, but IMDb says there's 3 seasons, and damn it, that's funny stuff. Well, if you recall from episode 18 when I was talking about slings and arrows, there's occasionally entire shows they make specifically for me to enjoy, and I think watching the misadventures of a chubby male theatrical misanthrope is... Hey... No, I very much enjoyed what I saw, and if they ever run more of it, I'm keeping my eyes open for sure.
Well, that was lovely.
That isn't quite how I would...
I'd like to speak to your manager.
Feedback.
Coming into the final stretches here, seriously, did I honestly have this much to say about my media collection? Billy Flynn of the Geek Radio Daily, awesome production, by the way. If you're not familiar, these folks comb the news feeds of topics of interest and compile them into a daily 20-minute burst of geek cred and occasional movie reviews. Anyway, Flynn posted the following in the podcast community group on Facebook. Quote, I can recommend the OSI files if you're into bionics, and there's always a fine time with VideoFuzzy. Which he followed up with, quote, VideoFuzzy is a show where a guy takes boxes of VHS tapes he recorded onto back in the day, watches them to see what's on them, and then talks about the hidden treasures. Yes, we all wish we had thought of that first. Now, I can't speak to the OSI files personally, they sound fantastic, but... Dude... I know this recommendation just showed up near the end of a kind of ridiculously long Facebook comment thread about staying on topic, but that recommendation is one of the nicest, just out-of-the-blue things I've encountered in the wild about this podcast, and it's unnervingly validating. Thank you. And with that, thank you all so much for checking in on my video cataloging project. You can check out my catalog listing along with audio links at videofuzzy.blogspot.com, past episodes at Apple Podcasts, Ghana, and most anywhere you get your podcasts. Feedback is always appreciated, and you can contact me through my blog or podcast sites, via email, or through my VideoFuzzy page on Facebook, or you can follow me at TJVideoFuzzy on Twitter. For VideoFuzzy, I'm Terry J. Aman. Happy viewing. It might be amazing, it might just be sketchy. We'll find out to get on VideoFuzzy.
This is podcasting gold. What are you talking about?
Video outtakes.
So, when I was doing my Jon Stewart and His Wacky List of Things credits for this one, I took a couple of different runs at the musical accompaniment, and when I went with the humming version for the actual production, I thought I might share one of the other takes I took. Enjoy. Memories light the corners of my mind. Misty watercolored memories of the way we were. Scattered pictures of the smiles we left behind, smiles we gave to one another for the way we were. Can it be that it was all so simple then? Or has time rewritten every line? If we had a chance to do it all again, tell me, would we? Could we? Memories may be beautiful, and yet what's too painful to remember, we simply choose to forget. So it's the laughter that we will remember whenever we remember the way we were, the way we were.